streaming it live.
Hi, are you presenting?
I don't know what.
Hi, Liam. I'm Michelle Brown.
Yeah.
So, Lillian is first. Hannah Joy is second. This is Anna, who I put your presentations on the laptop. If you have technical questions about your presentation, she's the person to ask. Carl is our MC. This is Casey and Ben. They're going to be streaming and zooming it. So we're going to plug the coffee in right now. That's what my timer was about.
I really like to be dressed as His Majesty. Can we do that?
Find a spot to put your stuff down. Presentation should be preloaded.
To be referred to as
That is a pretty good one. Weird is also pretty fancy.
What is?
Weird. The Scottish.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if it's down on the floor, I see why you were talking about the chair. Maybe for this one.
Or on top of an upside down trash can.
Yeah, but I need the trash. Oh, upside down trash can.
Or a stool. You want me to look at the whole stool in here?
Is that gonna be long enough? Not gonna work. I'm not pulling that table out with everything on it. It'll do as long as somebody touches it. It's not fire.
Talking to talk.
Carl,
No,
I was just joking earlier, but now I get about
you
it.
said I'm on at 1:55 and
Do you mind trying to get the speaker set up? I don't know how long this is going to take because this is.
So yeah, Ashley
Way too
typically
much.
does like a little thing before 3 o'clock exactly, just to give people the heads up on stuff.
Yeah.
So the fact that our first 3 presenters are here already is awesome.
that Hannah Joy is in the second round.
Oh, you're
unless
right.
it changed orders when you. I was looking off the pronunciation list.
Yeah, because there was like a time slot, and Nishal said that spot worked, so that's what happened. Okay. Yeah, next year. Yeah. So anyway, when Lisa was here, she was like, "Oh no, we don't build the break in. It just kind of happens naturally." Well, it didn't happen naturally, so that's why we had to.
Yeah.
I had to beg
Does,
people.
introduce myself, explain NedXStudents. Again, as you said, stress no Q&A.
That's the big things. The
Graduate students today, undergraduates tomorrow.
Stand in front because I don't.
Yeah,
I wanna see
judges
if this
will
is
choose the
actually
best
live.
person for each day. 3, then a break, then 4.
Yeah. She didn't typically say a whole lot. She just, hi, thank you for being here. We're so glad, blah, blah, whatever you want to add to it. And I think all she does is like say their
Okay.
name, so and so. She didn't even like give
That's
the
what you said, yeah.
presentation title. She just gives their
I
name.
say the name, they are in charge of their own presentation.
Oh, there's like a delay.
And then when we do the debrief, if you've got,
There was like a. It's on there. It's like a delay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I got to find out where the link is.
and then also like, there's anything today that's, oh, I need to do this tomorrow.
Sorry, I got stuck at the pharmacy. I'm sorry I
You
missed
could-
the lunch.
And so we have new judges, and hopefully the one who has been like the past 2 years is not judging this year. She was not invited back. Did the pronunciations help?
Yes.
Okay.
There's only one where I think, from what she gave, I was not sure how to do the last name. So it was
Okay.
Nishal, so I was just check
Okay.
their last name when she got here. But I've also been checking with everyone who have run.
Yeah,
tours.
yeah, that's all. Yeah. Because I gave them a guide. It was something I think Cornell or somebody used. I can't or Syracuse, and so I attached that. So if I wanted to use that to help them as a guide.
Generally, they've looked pretty helpful.
Yeah. Some schools when you graduate actually have like report you sing, and they use that before they like walk across stage or whatnot. We started this back in the fall with professors, and so I added it this time for the students so that because we have such a small window, between each presentation, that there's and everybody likes to hear the name pronounced correctly.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works for you.
Mhm.
So yours, the disinformation one, misinformation? Yeah, I'm excited about that. If I had to choose, that was one of the ones I wanted, just out of my own personal interest. But we don't choose them. With
Judges.
at the graduate school, the graduate school chooses the graduates, the honors college chooses the undergraduates, and then I pull in faculty from other colleges to judge each day. So today, everyone who's judging has a PhD. The ones who judge tomorrow, I don't think any of them have a PhD, but I think all three are working on a PhD. Yeah, I just felt like, if you're working on a PhD, you're probably going to feel like it's a little bit more fair to be judged by somebody.
Okay, I just sent you the link. It's live now, so.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. These are all people who teach. They're working on their doctorates, but they also teach.
When the one that's on.
Well, so I only has like a 2 days to like force me to yeah, everybody that's why at the very beginning when I put
That's
this out.
interesting. I didn't hear it at all. And I think I was.
No. And I just give them this little like, you come in at 8 a.m. on Monday, and that's the reason. And so,
I met with what happened was, before that Monday, I met with the advisor about doing formats, and then we met again the day before.
keep in mind that you can also, if something changes in your physical.
Yeah, I can
presentation-
definitely mention it. I guess that's the way. Yeah,
Because it's, so the graduate school, are you doctorate or master's? Okay, so the graduate school, they pick 4 doctoral level 3 masters. So and they really want to put emphasis on doctoral students. And I'm like, you know what, maybe in the future we do 1 day doctoral, 1 day masters. So I don't know, because they're the ones putting up the money. So like whoever wins, the check will come from the graduate school and the honors college. We don't have anything to do with it. All I do is I tally up the scores, but also the judges meet at the end of the day to confirm that each day they're happy. If y'all are interested in hearing what I'm saying, Lillian and Hannah Joy, at the graduate level, the graduate school selects which ones they want to present. And we try to also have like a wide variety, so it's not like all engineering or all English or all whatever, you know, so we try to have a selection of things. So the 3 people who are judging today all have doctorates. Tomorrow, the 3 people who are judging the undergraduates are all working on a doctorate, but they all have a master's. They also all teach. So at the end of the day, each day, the judges will convene back in our conference room to make sure that they're all on the same page. Because the very first year I did this in 22, we had a tie. And so with honor school is they just gave both of them the prize. And that's what it was $250. So the graduate school saw what we were doing in 22, like how can we get involved? So that's now how we're able to offer $500 each day. One winner take all.
Are you good?
I don't know if it's he's gone for the day, but I can call him and let him know. Or tell Jill. Okay. Hi, are you a presenter or a judge? Judge, are you Grace? I'm Michelle. You too, so you're Ben's wife. Yes. This is Ben Love's wife. Oh, she's gonna be judge today, yay. Give me a second, I'm gonna finish up with them, and I'm gonna get you settled. If you wanna have coffee or water, the coffee may not be quite ready, but, we're gonna roll food out to you.
in a particular spot?
Right here. And the thing is, it's like, we found out last year when they sat together that they really liked that. And so you'll have like full view right here. If those chairs don't work, those are always nice too, but, whatever works for y'all, because, back problems, whatever, Okay. But yeah, give me about 5 minutes and I'm gonna get this done.
So I guess in short, it's this one.
Sure.
It's just because we have so much going on to prepare for this, and it's a group effort, as you can see, like, 10 of our staff, and she's a librarian, Carl's librarian, Davey's working on a
Are
library.
the individual presenters get, or
Casey's a
how are they
librarian.
presenters get?
Yeah, it's not like one person, it takes a village. Yeah, and so this is the other thing about the dates. So I have to work with the Honors College and the grad school to find the date that works for everybody.
So
So
I've
there
asked
was
the head
one
teacher.
week in April that worked difficult for us because it's a library conference.
Yeah.
Half the people who work on this are not gonna be here.
Big old
So it was hard for after spring break.
30-second delay
but it's
on the live stream.
that's weird.
I don't think it's intentional.
Yeah,
Like, I'm still waiting for it to catch up to the part.
half of it's
Not
Wait, one more time.
honestly when it went in on and then yesterday was probably the worst.
and part of this also is not also about core level. How do you
Yeah,
make,
I would-
because the higher up you go, because I worked with the OPIX.
I can't hear her. I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so
You may need to turn up the volume on that speaker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a big baby.
Oh, that's okay.
And so sometimes you want something, and once you can, that's where, the gift is especially as you come up. So how you tell people that what you're doing is valuable, to the everyday person. Like the national parks people point out, oh my gosh, it's like, we're gonna cut your job because all you did was save one little, animal that's near extinction. Big deal. Why do we need that animal? That animal would just like carrying coal mine stuff, step those through.
Is it on Teams?
No,
Or just
it's through YouTube.
oh okay. Which is a whole mess.
It was a stupid mess. Yeah. I just had to figure out some new shit that I've never done before real quick.
Did you figure it out though?
Yeah, it's working. Unfortunately, I had to the stream that we had on all the flyers and everything. I messed it up by starting it and then stopping it, so it cleared out that link.
And so you had to-
So I had to recreate a new one to get it to actually do what I wanted it to do. And so now, you link up a streaming software through YouTube, you can do that. Oh my god, it's not the best, but it'll do.
Yeah. When being prepared and testing goes horribly wrong.
So,
Like my blood pressure, I just felt like
let me walk you up
I'm
here
like,
since
oh
you're on
no, my god.
Carl, this is the shop.
So hi, Carl.
So he's our MC. This is Carlos. He's our undergraduate student success librarian today.
Is this yours?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your receipts.
Karen in the black is our timekeeper. She's going to be sitting up on the front row. She's going to hold up cards that you'll see, and then the laptop is going to be closer within your eyesight, so you'll be able to check that as well. 13 minutes only. We drag you off.
Y'all
We
been
don't wanna
up
do
here
that.
for a while,
We
or
haven't had to do it the past 2 years.
Yeah, about an hour now.
Jeez, okay.
Well, that was just making sure everything was going to go correctly. Who knows if it will.
Wow. So did you have to send the link back out? Or
Yeah, I sent it to Anna. I think she's updating at least the website link.
Really appreciate it. So, feel free to do what you need to do.
And Steve, I can check your presentation with you.
Did you tell her that I'm not making you do the TikTok?
Oh, no, he
He
didn't.
volunteered.
He's pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Public library stuff.
I know, I'm really volunteer for everything. So each one of you will have one of these. I'm trying something new because I think it's just a habit. So they have been told from even before they volunteer to not, it's just a habit. If you have any questions,
It is too, yeah.
right? So Carl will reinforce it too. So Carl will do a little bit.
how'd the Glowforge presentation go yesterday? Yeah. How many people showed up?
6.
All right. Was this the people that reached out and were like, "Hey, I know I've got people who want to learn," or?
I think so.
Gotcha. Yeah, the roofers, when they replaced my roof, like, obviously tore a bunch of shit off. And I was mowing the yard and went through my shoe and like about an inch and a half into my foot. Yeah. And it was, I pulled it out and I was like, this is the grossest thing I've ever seen. Like, I'm gonna die. So I went and got like a tetanus shot and everything I needed, but I stepped on a wrestling nail.
Oh, you got the link all. You updated the link and all that crap. Thank you. Sorry about that. You gotta get a tetanus shot.
Yeah, I got one already.
Arm what?
Arm.
I was saying how did it have a gate?
Mowing my yard in Crocs. Which was
Are you for
my, yeah, it did nothing to stop me.
I don't know how to mute it while we're live. I don't know.
Oh, good, good.
I don't know how to. Do I? We'll do that whenever I hit record on that. I'm trying to figure out.
If there's a way to mute it.
The last 2 years, they were, yeah, one of the undergraduates, the very first year.
Surely it.
While it's muted on there, but it's not muted on the live stream. It's only muted on my. This is stupid.
Is there not like a, what about, like right there? No, no.
I'm streaming through here. There's no mute option. That's audio. Oh my
What I
god.
really want to do is an academic say, people used to say you have questions or other people asking questions. Really like
I mean, certainly that has to help, right? Like,
Where's the
there's one person, whatever you want to write, it doesn't go anywhere beyond.
video capture? That's not
It
audio.
honors the grad school copies that none of the students ever see it. And so if you just put it under it as you do it, at 4 o'clock when we finish up, I'm gonna put you on our conference room for after 15
Okay.
minutes. So I can
Yeah, just keep that on there for now.
I'm
not gonna-
I was looking for my car. It's so. I said the opposite of everyone.
This 6 months.
It doesn't help.
Oh.
Get you forward. That's crazy. That's sure.
I remember they came out when I was like 8 years old. And we got like just free games. And we all played poker and like got absolutely smashed all over.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Really hard. Somebody described Lauren Vogel's ex-husband as a human in Canada for looking. That's what I associate with the logo.
That's like, that's maybe one of the sickest friends I've ever heard. I'm not exactly sure why, but I love it. So the shirt didn't work.
Is the light on that thing on?
Mhm. Just make it like a therapy session. You know, just go into all the problems.
Time for a good old-fashioned struggle session.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to NedX.
Chase Carl with that if he starts getting a little antsy.
I still have a pair of the correct Rick Moranis.
It's like, surely that's not us, man. Is it like a person limit? Is that why we're not doing teams?
Because I found it too annoying to deal with.
Gotcha.
But
This has proven way better. So is it like a video software that you're using to stream through YouTube?
yes, YouTube was not recognizing this.
That is a
And so this was recognizing it. So I had to, then I noticed that you can link up your streaming software with YouTube. And so I just had to figure out how to do that. And it's working, but
My sisters and I are
that was really annoying and stupid.
so thriller.
yes, it does.
But also,
But anyway, so we have like
I guess if I give you a signal, I had to go get the wife. So, her tire went dead, of course, this morning. I'm like, yeah, that's what I need today. Her assistant actually changed her tire for her.
Nice.
Yeah. While I was on the way to go there, I was like in a mad rush to get there, and then it's like, well, my assistant changed it. I'm like, okay,
Love it when
like that's awesome. We owe her a steak dinner.
yeah.
But now, she's on. It's like a donut, so
Yeah.
I just told her like, if I have to, I'll leave, but don't look right behind.
Yeah. Well, she should be able to get what, like 30 miles on that donut.
Yeah, she'd be able to get to Olive Branch, get it changed. We'll have to buy a new one, which that reminds me, if I get some money
a
from
nice
savings.
calming break, and then you go.
I think I need- Oh, we got paid. Okay, thank Christ. Oh my God. I can get contacts now too.
You gotta love it when
You wanna check this mess up at the point now?
Yeah, taking more drugs. I think it's like that. Some days are like that. What I don't need.
might turn up the volume a little bit.
Talking again there. Now it's actually the speaker, not just me being okay with it. We'll get started in just a couple minutes.
You're like 18.
Just leave it that loud. Said just leave it that loud.
I was thinking about phones the other day and how we don't really do that anymore. But it's okay, because you still show embarrassing pictures. Yes, exactly. Just.
Yeah. Yes, we set up spaces that they can see. This one?
This is like my fifth cup of coffee, and I'm still tired.
I don't know what's going on with this thing. Alright, whatever.
Well, that would probably make sense too, because if they're allowed to range between the podium and the speaker, you can see it better.
Starts at 2. Oh, I gotta run at 3 to go to class. But I'll actually be here on time tomorrow to help set up.
It's all good. Just too many variables today. Trying to figure out.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be a little easier tomorrow.
So that you could start at 2.
Joel looked at the PA system yesterday. Gotta figure it out.
Good. Not the fuse.
Pull the back panel off. Where the power cord. Yeah, we're all good. Where the power cord, like where it's
Welcome, everyone.
connected to like the main board.
I'm excited to welcome you to NedXStudents. My name is Carl Hess, and I will be your host today. At NedXStudents, University of Memphis students share their current research in engaging short formats. These presentations do not include question and answer sessions. Today, we will have presentations from our graduate students, and tomorrow you can join us here for presentations from undergraduate students. Our esteemed panel of judges in the back will review each presentation today and take a best one, and our judges tomorrow will do the same. Today, we will have 3 presentations, followed by a short 15-minute break, and then our remaining 4 presentations. To get us started, I would like to invite our first presenter, Lillian Onian.
Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, panel of judges, fellow students, all protocol, genders, and sexualities, as you observe. My name is Lillian O'Neill. I'm a second year graduate student of journalism and strategic media here at the University of Memphis. I'm here to present my research titled "You Are Not a Sin: A Textual Analysis of LGBTQ plus Experiences in West Africa." Before I dive into this presentation, I would like to acknowledge my positionality as a researcher. Now, I am a heterosexual Nigerian scholar. I recognize that my positionality influences my research and how I tackle my data. And I do not share the lived experiences of the LGBT community in West Africa. However, my perspective is shaped by both insider and outsider status. Insider because I'm Nigerian and I understand the cultural, legal, and societal factors that the LGBTQ community face in Africa. Outsider because, again, I do not experience this firsthand. I acknowledge that no research is free from bias, but my commitment to critically engage with LGBTQ narratives while contributing to responsible scholarship in the field of digital media. Right. So, homosexuality or same-sex relationships are heavily criminalized in the continent of Africa, with the exception of South Africa, which has a sexual orientation clause embedded in its constitution. Matter of fact, in Nigeria, if you are homosexual, you get 14 years jail term. And in some parts of Kenya and northern part of Nigeria, you will get the death penalty. But despite this fact, the past 5 years have seen LGBTQ Africans take to social media as an avenue for self-exploration. They show their lives, they show pictures and videos of themselves. And these trends have continued to grow, despite the fact that Africa has the worst legal framework, societal framework that stops the LGBTQ plus community from living their full lives. Now, we do know that the transformative potentials of social media is a lot. We all use social media in our day-to-day lives. I am a journalist and I use social media every day. But little or no research has been done in how the long-term effects of using social media affect our identity development, even social support. And that's what my research aims to do. My research aims to bridge the gaps in knowledge by critically examining the lived experiences of LGBTQ individuals offline and offline. That being said, this study seeks to explore the role of social media in the identity development and social support of LGBTQ Africans, and it aims to provide a nuanced research and understanding of how these individuals interact on social media and how this interaction facilitates self-expression, social support, and activism. Now, a lot of work has been done in the field of social media and how social media serves as a platform for self-representation, social support, identity development. This research has shown over the years that digital support as seen on social media heavily influences our mental well-being, helps us with identity development. As a matter of fact, in 2004, Ononuga explored the usage patterns of social media and how LGBTQ Africans use social media. That study found out that mostly these individuals use social media for identity exploration, activism, and to fight for their rights. But though this scholarship present me a solid background for my study, none of them have gone a step further to see how the social support that the LGBTQ community get on social media influences their identity development. And that's what my study did. Now, for this study, the theoretical framework that I use is the queer theory as postulated by Butler and Green, and social identity theory as postulated by Tatcher and Turner. Now, queer theory basically challenges heteronormativity, while social identity theory explains and examines the dynamic interaction between individuals and their social environment. Now, I'll go back to heteronormativity. Now, that concept, it kind of conceptualizes same-sex relationships as abnormal and the relationships with people of opposite sex or heterosexuality as privileged and normal. Now, these research questions guided this exploration. The first research question was, how do LGBTQ plus social media influencers in West Africa use social media to explore their identities? Second one wanted to know what common themes emerged from the social media profiles examined during this study. For the method, this study employed the qualitative research design using the constructivist grounded theory approach. Now, though I had theoretical frameworks guiding this exploration, I wanted theories to emerge naturally from the data. And that's why I used the constructivist grounded theory. The data sources I used were the secondary data analysis of publicly available interviews and as seen on YouTube and Clear podcast, and textual analysis of social media profiles. I examined the post interactions and comments on the Facebook pages of these individuals, on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Semi-structured interviews were exempted from this research because, again, these individuals face a lot of repercussions, a lot of restrictions in Africa, so it was better to analyze publicly available interviews. No direct contact or participation was involved in this, and the focus was on LGBTQ influencers in Nigeria and Ghana. Why Nigeria and Ghana as a representation of West Africa? Because both countries are the digital hubs of Africa, and they both have varying degrees of LGBTQ laws and rights in both countries. So you would agree with me that it's a good pick for the exploration. Now the procedure it was a 6-step approach. First, a line-by-line coding of the text on the social media pages. This included the captions and the videos. I transcribed the videos, and there was a line-by-line coding. I broke down the text, and I focused on the recurring text, phrases, and words that this social media gave me. And then I categorized the patterns, and then I did a comparative analysis to refine emerging terms and theories. So for the result, 3 key themes emerged from this exploration. The first theme was identity exploration and self-representation. Under that, I had 3 sub-themes, and the theory that emerged from this was what I termed the queer digital identity theory. This theory enforces the fact that LGBTQ individuals construct and negotiate their identities online, despite the fact that there are legal, societal, religious repercussions that are tied to being gay. This is the example of the direct quotes that I pulled from the social media and interview videos. One of the profiles said, "I know posting pictures of myself in ways that aren't typical for a man in Nigeria challenges what society expects, but I don't care. It's my way of showing who I truly am." The second thing that emerged was the social support and community building. Under that, I had the online activism and advocacy and mutual aid and emotional support as the sub-themes. This theme gave me 2 data-driven theories. The network resistance theory, which again reinforces the fact that digital activism, as used by the LGBTQ community in Africa, is a form of digital disobedience and a tool for advocacy. The second theory was the digital resilience theory, which showed that online spaces enable emotional healing and solidarity among marginalized groups, especially the LGBTQ community in Africa. Lastly, digital vulnerability and race was the last theme that I got, and under the theme were 2 sub-themes: direct experiences and indirect experiences. What I termed digital precarity theory and digital conformity theory emerged from the data. Now, this theory just explained the 2-phase nature of social media, one as an avenue for liberation and the other one as an avenue for oppression, as seen in the direct quotes of the social media profiles that I examined. The first one said, "The moment my video went viral," yes, their videos do go viral, "my DMs were flooded with death threats. People are sending me messages saying I deserve to die for just existing." The second person said, "One day I tried to meet a guy in a dating app in Enugu, that's in Nigeria. He pretended like he was gay. When I came there, he attacked me, beat me up, and took my wallet." Now, one word that kept coming out, and that's why we got these 2 theories, was what the videos termed as ketoing. Heterosexuals or homophobic people will invite a gay person, and then, when they go out, they try to rob them and even commit atrocious acts on them. So in conclusion, this study contributes to the existing scholarship on queer theory and social identity theory, right? It also points to the 2-phase nature of social media, avenue for liberation and avenue for expression. Now, this study wasn't without any limitations. The first one that came up was the reliability and validity, potential self-representation bias. Of course, we use social media, and everybody will want a picture-perfect life of themselves on video. The second one was the generalizability of this study. Because we use LGBTQ plus influencers, you would agree with me that it's not an adequate representation. It might not be an adequate representation of the broader LGBTQ plus community. Lastly is the researcher bias. I'm heterosexual, and I controlled for this by maintaining a reflexive journal where I put down my thoughts and by decisions and justification throughout the data collection. This research fills knowledge in gaps in the under-researched role of social media in fostering identity development, promoting visibility, and collective belonging within the marginalized group, contributes to queer theory and SIT, and contributes to the ongoing conversation on LGBTQ rights in Africa. Thank you.
Up next, we will have Michelle Copley.
So good afternoon, everyone. My research focus on how much does it rain in those short bursts of extreme rainfall. And today I'm going to walk you through an important question. Are short duration extreme rainfall becoming more intense and frequent in southeastern US? And what does it mean for us and our infrastructure? So let's begin. So imagine a situation where flash floods are down the city and our stormwater systems are overwhelmed and our infrastructure are unable to cope with these situations. So these are not just hypothetical situations, they are really happening, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this. So these short duration extreme rainfall, especially those lasting less than 2 hours, they are the major driver of the flash floods. Yet we don't know how they change over time and how to measure those changes, what do studies suggest, and how to prepare for the future. And in this regard, many research has been done, but most of them focus on longer duration, like daily and 24-hour. But flash floods doesn't wait for 24 hours, they form within a minute. And apart from that, there are many studies using future rainfall projections to identify the trends in precipitation, but it has been found that there is a discrepancy between climate projection and the observed data. So in this figure, in figure A, we see an observation for a historical period, and in figure B, we see the simulated and projected data for the same period, and we can see a striking difference between them. So we should be very careful while using those simulated data sets. And on top of this, the choice of metrics that we use to take those trends also matters a lot, because most of the studies use either threshold or percentile or frequency-based metrics, and only few of them use magnitude-based index. And these frequency-based metrics could be misleading. For example, in this illustration, where red curve represents the empirical distribution for future climate and blue one for the current climate, if we look at the same chance of occurrence, in this case, the 20% chance of occurrence, we can see the magnitude of the rainfall for the same chance of occurrence are strikingly different. So this means that counting the number of events exceeding a certain chance of occurrence could be misleading. And in this another example, where we see if we take a certain magnitude of rainfall, then that magnitude could have a different frequency or different chance of occurrence in future and current climate. Therefore, counting the number of events exceeding a certain value or certain threshold could also mislead us. And moreover, most of these frequency-based metrics are not commonly used in engineering design. In engineering designs, we use maxima or magnitude-based metrics. And you can think of it like this. Suppose you are tracking your health, and if you only look at how often you became sick, and you completely ignore like how bad was it when you were sick, then you wouldn't get a complete trend, right? So, and on top of this, rainfall is often measured at a single point using rain gauges. So most of the studies assume rainfall as a point process. And but rainfall isn't just a dot in a map. So this leads to lower signal to noise ratio at a point scale. And this could weaken our ability to detect actual trends and create inconsistencies. And as a result, even nearby weather stations may show opposite trends. For instance, in this radar map, which is roughly 40 by 40 miles and centered around Charlotte, North Carolina, we can see the graininess of the rainstorm happening there. And there are many rain gauges here represented by black dots. And we see here those rain gauges detect different part of the grain, and they will measure different values of maxima. So as a result, they could report different trends. And an important thing to note here is if we had a very long series of these radar maps, then eventually this effect of graininess would even out. But currently we don't have that, at least for short duration rainfall. So what's the solution? So one of the solutions is we could analyze our data by grouping these stations into a neighborhood. So this is our neighborhood approach. So to tackle all of these problems, we investigate how the choice of frequency-based and magnitude-based metrics influence our ability to detect trend using these methods. And we also attempt to mitigate the issue of low signal to noise ratio, the issue of graininess, by applying the neighborhood approach. And we extracted our event for this study using two different approaches. In one way, we used a frequency-based index, and in another way, we used a magnitude-based index. For example, in this plot of the daily time series of rainfall, first we set a threshold of 98th percentile, shown here by a red line. Now, the frequency-based index or annual accidents count is the number of events exceeding this threshold each year. Like for the year 2000, the number of events exceeding this threshold is 3. And the annual maxima series are represented here by the green points, which are the largest value of recorded rainfall for each year. So let's see our, so this is our study area. So we gathered rainfall data from 247 weather stations spread across 11 states, and we consider doing our analysis for these durations. And this is our result from single station analysis. So this result is from frequency-based analysis, and these results are from magnitude-based analysis. And we can see here the number of stations showing significant increasing trend in frequency are strikingly different than the number of stations showing significant increasing trend in magnitude. So this is where the choice of metrics matters. Now, one more thing to notice here is when we zoom in into the figure, we can see here even stations that are located close to each other are showing completely different trends. So this is the effect of graininess or the spatial variability of the rainfall. So we try to create a more continuous, spatially continuous trend pattern. So we use the neighborhood method, and the result from the neighborhood method looks like this. So here still we see there are many stations with significant increasing trend in frequency for most of the inland areas, and only Gulf Coast area shows decreasing trend in both frequency and magnitude. And for other inland areas, we see at least with increasing trend in magnitude. So these are our stats from single station analysis. All of these numbers are in percentage, and we see here that 3 to 4 times the number of stations show significant trend in frequency than in magnitude, and only 2 to 3% of the stations show decreasing trend in either frequency or magnitude. And these are our stats from neighborhood analysis, and we see that 4 to 5 times the number of neighborhoods shows increasing trend in frequencies, then increasing trend in magnitude, and only 1 to 3% of the neighborhood display a decreasing trend in both frequency and magnitude. So let's see some regional results. So for Central Atlantic coast, we see a clear increasing trend in both frequency and magnitude. For Southern Atlantic coast, we see mixed result. For Gulf Coast, we see a decrease in both frequency and magnitude. For Mississippi embedded region, we see a balance of increasing and decreasing trend. And for inland area, we see a strong increase in frequency across all area. And there are some places with significant increase in magnitude. So in the bigger picture, except for the Gulf Coast and the Southern Atlantic coast, short duration extreme may become more frequent and intense. And current trends in magnitude are weak, but a stronger signal is likely to emerge as more data becomes available. And in conclusion, detecting trend in extreme rainfall depends on how we define them and the chosen metric. Like if we only consider frequency-based index, then we might overestimate the risk. And if we only consider the magnitude-based result, then we might ignore those frequently occurring nuisance plot. Therefore, in engineering design, we should account for both change in frequency and magnitude. Thank you for your time and attention.
All right. And last before our break, we have Liam Street.
Alright, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Liam Chu, and I'm a PhD student in MIS under the Department of Business. And along with my advisor, I'm very happy to share with you my research on deepfakes and the 2024 election. But before I get into all of my research, we have some breaking news from the President's office.
Thank you for coming out to NedX to see these very, very amazing presentations. Very amazing, I tell you. Just so you know, I signed an executive order mandating that Liam Chu be the automatic winner. He's the best, the very best. He deserves it.
Well, you heard from the man himself, right? Thank you so much. I'm going to get some lunch. I'm kidding, of course. I'm kidding, of course. So, just out of curiosity from all the audience, how many of you have heard of or are familiar to some degree about deepfakes? That's a pretty good crowd. This is great. This is great to see. Now, for those who've never seen this before, a deepfake is essentially just an AI-generated synthetic media where someone says or does something they didn't actually do. Now, the threat of deepfakes is there's a lot of implications with this, right? So deepfakes are very hyper-realistic. When we're talking about an ideal deepfake, this is one where it can compromise 2 out of our 5 senses, our sense of sight and our sense of hearing. That's like 40% of who we are. And the bigger threat about deepfakes isn't just the fact that we're accepting misinformation as fact. We've seen that for the past 10 years with the whole fake news movement. But rather, the deeper issue is disregarding truth as misinformation due to this reality altering media. And the final point I'd like to touch on is that video that I made before was very easy to make. It only took me 2 minutes. And those 2 minutes just went into writing out the script and not so much the technical aspects at all. And so, in terms of how deepfakes have evolved over time, so it got its start in 2017 on a subreddit, and it was used to propagate non-consensual celebrity pornography. And over time, its uses got a lot less hedonic and more malevolent, or more utilitarian, such as its use in blackmail, its use in fraud, and its use as its scams. And now, until today, especially back in the 2024 election, it's been used and weaponized to paint politicians in a negative light. So to kind of move into our research, right? Research is about deepfakes in the election. And we know, right, that voting is a very important process in a democratic society. It represents our beliefs and our preferences on who we think is best to run the country for the next 4 years, at least in the United States. Now, in an ideal world, right, the information that we get about our candidates should come from 100% vetted sources and truthful information, so that we can make an informed decision, or so that the information that we obtain about our candidates is all grounded in informed and truthful information. But the reality is that's not always the case, right? Especially in the 2024 election, we had lots of intense polarization from both sides of the political spectrum. And then furthermore, adding into this mix, the fake news, the misinformation, and with my research, deepfakes. So to kind of highlight some, cases of deepfakes on leadership. For example, with Donald Trump, we saw the arrest photos. We saw photos of him kissing Fauci. And it would be really nice if I could pull up the photos, but they're a lot harder to find because they've been struck off the internet. Now, there's, Elizabeth Warren, where there's a deepfake of her bad-mouthing Republican voters. We've also seen Pelosi deepfakes where they slowed the video down to make her look incompetent. Then we also have a lot of Biden deepfakes, right, where he's being transphobic. He's talking about conscripting American soldiers to fight the Russian-Ukraine war. But this isn't just a US-based phenomenon. This is international, right? So in this example too, there's been a deepfake of Zelensky where he's telling his own soldiers to surrender to Russia. And so given this disruptive technology and its implications, this motivates us to understand or to look into how do deepfakes influence voters' perceptions of trust? And furthermore, how does this change between the two candidates in the 2024 election? And then the second question we're interested in is which aspects of trustworthiness influence candidate distrust? And so to kind of give us a lens and a perspective on how we view the effects of deepfakes, we call upon cognitive dissonance. And so cognitive dissonance is essentially just this discomfort or tension that we feel when we hold two or more conflicting cognitions, so be it an attitude, a belief, or a behavior. And human beings, mentally, they don't like to have this chaos. They prefer harmony. And so they're going to be motivated to restore this harmony, be it employ some sort of coping mechanism, denial, begrudgingly accepting the new information. It really just depends on what's causing this dissonance. Imagine a time where you thought you knew how something works, and for the longest time, you were right. But then suddenly, out of the blue, an alternative perspective comes in and shakes up your reality. That's a very uncomfortable feeling, right? And that's the feeling of dissonance. So what we're saying for our research is that voters have preconceived attributions, notions about political figures. And then when they see the deepfake of that candidate in a compromised position, it's going to induce a state of dissonance. And so voters are going to be motivated to reassess the candidate's benevolence, integrity, and competence so that they can restore their mental harmony. So the benevolence looks at, is the candidate altruistic? He or she a good person? Integrity looks at their ethical compass, their moral honor, are they an honorable person? And then competence looks at, can that candidate get the job done? So to collect our data, we ran a 2x2 factorial experimental design where we have our treatment and our control. And then we also have a Kamala Harris and Donald Trump group. So essentially, I created a deepfake of both Kamala and Harris, and the content of the deepfake was, it was a leaked conversation between the candidate and a foreign agent. And then so after participants have been immersed in this deepfake, we then surveyed their distrust, we surveyed the 3 aspects of trustworthiness, and we also surveyed for their demographics, the different types of biases, their political affiliations, as well as their social media use. So in the end, we had around 60 samples in each group, leading to a total sample size of 240 people. So, what did we find? So after running tons and tons of ANOVAs, what we found overall was that deepfakes did have a negative effect with white and silver bars. There was a drop in perceived benevolence, integrity, and competence. But that effect, that drop, isn't equal throughout both the candidates. When we look at the red and the blue lines, what we can see is that this drop was only significant for Kamala Harris. Interesting, yet very worrisome how that deepfakes can have differential effects. Now, in terms of which of those 3 traits were important to voters, what we found was that only benevolence and integrity mattered, but not so much competence. Furthermore, from our control variables, we found that gender bias was also significant. And so I think what it showed was that those that were more gender biased were less likely to support Harris, but more likely to support Trump. So that motivated us to kind of go back and redo those maneuvers, but this time include that gender factor. So now we're asking ourselves, do male voters and female voters actually, or do they perceive, or how do they judge deepfakes of both of the candidates? And so what we found was that for female voters, this decrease in negative effect was consistent throughout the board for both candidates. But for male candidates, or male voters, it's a little different. There was a negative drop for the Kamala Harris deepfake group, but there's an increase for those in the Donald Trump group. And keep in mind, this is a negative deepfake, right? This is a deepfake about, someone colluding with a foreign agent. Yet we still see an increase for those in the Trump position. Very interesting and also very worrisome. So why is this? Now, these are just some possible explanations, but our results suggest that in terms of this interaction effect of deepfakes with the candidate and the gender, this suggests that there might be some bias against women at play. And one thing I forgot to mention is that in regards to gender bias, that was essentially just a scale on bias against women. So that is a possibility. Now, in terms of why competence didn't matter, it could be possible that voters just perceived both of those candidates as incompetent and just only had the integrity and the benevolence to go off of when it came to making their decision to support who they wanted to support. But more importantly, what does this mean, right? Well, we were able to document the negative effects of deepfakes. But not only that, right? We were able to document that the damage that deepfakes have to its victims, at least in the political context, isn't equally distributed. And furthermore, from the voter perspective, what we found was that they appraise deepfakes differently. Why is it when, even if the candidate is perceived in a negative light, the male voters still up there perceive trustworthiness of the candidate? Very interesting and very worrisome. Now, to kind of cap this off with our limitations, this is just a cross-sectional data collection, so to kind of establish a more stronger case, you probably want to take some measurements over time. But, for our case, we were on a very time-sensitive thing, because we wanted to run this before the election, and lots of problems went into trying to put this together. And then finally, another limitation could be that this could all just be from the effects of the leaked conversation with the foreign agent. Maybe if I redid the deepfake and was about racism, it might be something completely different. You don't know that. That's up to future research. But what we do know is that as generative AI gets more and more sophisticated, we're going to start to see a lot of more reality-altering deepfakes. And as this becomes more normalized in future elections, this is really going to challenge the fabric of democracy, right? And so it is up to us as voters to really be critical of what we see and vet it with other sources and make sure everything is consistent. The future of truth depends on us. We're the last line of defense. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So now we have our break time. We've got a little bit ahead of schedule, so we'll connect again here at 3 o'clock for our next presenter. In the meantime, grab something to drink or snack over there. We have restrooms in the back, if you need them in the occupancy restrooms on the third floor.
I'd be curious to know what the battle would look like if both candidates had if both candidates had, like, you know, just like more congruency between the candidate.
Still think it would skew the crowd.
I think that's probably true.
Hi. It's working now. So yeah. It's been like usually everything works perfectly, and then since last week everything has decided to not work at all. Right. So,
Sucks.
yeah. Like our PA system that we had
Yeah.
probably only had like 20 hours of actual use out of the thing.
Yeah.
Just an hour before the Anacondas last week. Just stopped working. Just wouldn't come on.
Huh.
So we had to borrow that one, and now we're having to buy
Where is
another
that
one.
from?
The events department or something.
Cool. Buying another one.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, they told me.
I mean, it kind of has to, right? Like, I
You
don't
have
know
to
that we
have.
have a choice.
No, right? Yeah, because the speaker of the podium knew it crapped out. So,
That's the option.
yeah.
And it's all, or I guess it was wireless, right? Didn't it? I mean, once upon a time, like years ago.
That thing just got worse and worse. Sorry, I agree.
Good to see you again. Just outside so we can
Yeah.
You were you a judge?
I was.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for helping out.
Yeah, it was super fun. It's so interesting. So much cool history.
And a lot of them are going to be presenting tomorrow.
Killing it.
Oh, cool.
Doing a great job.
So excited. How's your week going? Yeah. I guess.
It's been a busy couple weeks. We had the guest speaker here last week, and then we had like 3 other events, and then we had this. And then we had student research forum, and then we've got tomorrow undergrads. We got a lot going on.
Yeah.
I thank everybody.
Yeah. I feel like the beginning of the semester is like faculty like teaching heavy and now it's like research, presenting, trying
People think good about their time.
So did y'all find that speaker?
Which is
We had to borrow that from Pam Cash.
amazing.
We did what we could.
Well,
And we had Joel
this
from
is
the
like-
library came and looked at ours
That's a good
yesterday.
amount of time. Like,
We opened it up, and it's
Right.
like
you can't do a whole lecture, but like, you can present an idea.
which was hand done. Yeah, like I mean, it's like 6 years old, but it sat in a closet for like 2 years before we might realize we had it. We have probably 20 hours of use out of
But I
it.
feel like
We've never
I
opened
feel
it
like
up
when I
since,
first got
this
here,
came with
we were
electric
pretty
tape,
loose with the time
so like, it wasn't even done very well. So it's kind of cheap and everything. So. They said we can get a new one. No, we have to. We have to get this now. We don't have to.
that one seems to be
Yeah.
doing well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of mixing it up, matching it up with our various microphones. We got so many options for that
Do you have
now.
another mic, like a handheld?
We do, but we don't have a cord that
like I can put down.
I don't have a
Because the
converter.
one guy kind of was going
Put that.
Yeah, it's just certain ways. Like I don't know. The next guy, he had it perfect.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the difference is.
first and third. No problem.
I don't think you could like get it.
It just wouldn't sit right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
If he can sit it right and get it right perfectly, he would have been all right.
Well,
These events,
I
every
guess
single time we have one of these events, we learn something new that we have to learn. Okay, next time we'll do this differently.
Moving target.
Yeah.
partner brought home.
We've been begging them for years to get some kind of spotlight put up. I hope Gerald will agree with that at some point.
That'd be a good idea.
You know, like a white, pretty mild cheese. So she got sharp cheddar and like half that bag in like 2 days. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Hey, Kroger's private selection, they have this like a taste like a rectangle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You get squares, they do.
I eat the entire.
It isn't that bad, but
Like that, so yeah.
sick kitty yesterday, so I'm like in the bed yesterday.
Sorry.
She's okay. Yeah, she's a great one. I was sitting in the lobby. I was looking at the magazine, there's a cat magazine, and it has like, determine your cat's age. She's 16 and a half.
Probably
That's exactly what I was
Hey, my mom's cat.
She's sitting with a bottle on your belly.
Oh,
that's funny.
She was 10, she had cancer. She did not react well to the chemo. We tried to do some light chemo. It kind of, it wasn't a. So, not a like breast cancer, but like you can like extend the life. Like it's kind of like a management.
Okay.
If you do like a light chemo with a small cell lymphoma, like it's basically like it's almost like kind of a severe case of IBD.
Grandparent care. Mental health as well.
If you do like steroid only, it's like a year. If you do like chemo, it's like 3 years.
Or yeah, like who's getting?
It's a good quality of life. Yeah.
Or is it
Kidney shut down.
violence towards other kids from kids?
Sad too to like have hope in that regard.
Grandparent caregivers, youth mental health and violence. What's the research? Like I'm intrigued, but I don't know what the premise is yet.
It's a long story. The old one is my partner's mother. We've actually had one. She was so ill that we've had her for 10 years. She was too ill to take care of her. And then the other three, the one that just died, were the stray cat broke into our shed and had a little kid. Like, we just like, when we first tried to adopt them, we were getting takers. And then one person that expressed like wanting a barn cat, and we were just like, and that's the one who just died. We were just like, her name is Brave, but she's not Brave. We're like, we can't have a barn cat. So we just decided to keep her.
Yeah, that's so real.
A scaredy cat.
Yeah. And the funny thing on our first date,
It's hard learning in the first one.
she said, I'll
I
never do a
took
cat.
English in college. Like,
For some reason, all we're talking yeah, one of them. But she, not like that she didn't like him, she was like, she's very attached to that.
definitely.
She had a cat, but she didn't like, I don't know, I guess she didn't want to do it with her mouse. It's just a funny, I always bring it up. You said you didn't?
What do you mean? If you're gonna tell me my word choice is bad, tell me what word to use.
The only
I don't get
plan.
to just say word choice.
Hit me with that WC.
She's the one. So you sure you want to run this one? Okay. She knew she would get attached. That's why.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's working.
Anyway, enough of that cat.
My daughter really wants a cat.
It's not a very good
I
stuff.
can't do it. I had a dog
I'm not either.
who I got.
I also believe that commas should go where I decide to take a breath and listen. Not grammatically where they should go. I'm just like, that seems like a good place to pause.
I know.
Comma.
It was a lot.
So,
500 might get us
Time
being the same situation.
I'm trying to get through.
But she got the cat.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm like, maybe I can't.
That's what
definitely can.
Oh no, a friend of mine back home. Come on now.
I know. Hamster. We have a
Very.
So you're gonna need these headphones. They're like stuff I didn't even ask for.
One of my old bosses, she got we always
My sister lives here and she just got a puppy.
Okay,
So
so
I'm
there's
going
usually
which is a good separation of labor.
I didn't know that for real. Because if I had known that, I'd have been like, John, we actually need like a Les Paul for music library.
That's why I really like it. It's amazing. I do enjoy. My parents have films. Whenever I go,
You know, students
Wait,
like
like-
work a car and it's going to
They submitted
you are very good. Catching this
Did he move out to Santa Barbara? Was he going to school there or was it his significant one?
What's crazy? I know people don't know this, but you can write a video and say make this 50 words, and it'll do it. Like, this video like, I literally wrote a cover letter the other day and I was like, 850 words exactly. Like, why not?
Yeah, this position opened up.
I've started to come around on Utah.
Same job.
Yeah.
I like her.
I'm like, let's make more deep fakes. Let's just sow chaos. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I like her.
Since we kind of got back.
Yeah.
But she's just a lot.
Yeah. Sometimes like, no, I don't have time.
No, I straight up one time, I had some people coming over to music library. Actually,
Oh yeah, it was
my
wrong.
mom was coming by. My mom had just called me that she was like in the parking lot.
I hear that. There are some things I don't care
Stephanie like walks in this.
enough to do. Like writing my paper for school.
She was coming by, but now she just kind of
I'll
pops
write my
up.
paper.
Usually when stuff's already done.
Making a resume that I'm about to send out to like 80 different people. I might use that a little bit. Yeah. All I'm saying is I've been playing with it. And it's kind of cool.
I started making math. I was like, this is I legit see it saying that it was somewhat beneficial.
I have trouble with picturing it.
That's something I've read before, that when you flood the zone with shit,
She said it was when she was like,
the people that benefit tend to be far right figures because they benefit much less from it.
Yeah.
I was like,
It's very fair.
the right is pretty. or I've done like just like very much.
The guy who runs the convention swears he's going to come again every year.
But yeah, anyway, because of her affinity for like gravitating concepts and traditional sources. So
Yeah.
I thought I was joking. I was kind of
There
serious.
is
Like you have to leave.
if your whole platform is distrust the like institutional
There's other conventions.
system,
It's just so
then any like
But she's doing
addition
like
to that just confirms your belief.
there's so now she has to learn exactly serious. She's really good.
She's in the
Probably cases.
Well, if we have somebody on campus, we need to.
currently
We usually open it up. Although last week was open to anybody. But it's clear.
How many?
she just broke up with her long-term boyfriend, so she's on the she's
It's a worthy watch.
if you ever see her
I recently got a password. Going through
Did it get turned out?
the catalog, so that's a good one. Been watching a bunch of studio.
it was because she knew she was buddy students. Like I was never really part of the equation until like
No, she was in the Air Force rifle.
Yeah.
Before she got drummed out of the Air Force and actually finished up her time.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
They
really
always like wait.
Eternity. I know, right?
yeah.
Because it was like a Friday.
Her family's black. Her mom was in the military
I
too.
mean, 2 years ago, like,
Lived up in like Fairbanks, Alaska.
we showed it up.
I'm so happy.
She's interesting.
Yeah.
But she invited me to go like
He didn't want to bring her, but like, I think he just didn't.
it's just so nice. I was like one of them straight up houses.
I would say the most like. Oh yeah.
That's what I knew. I was like,
That's why it's my favorite.
these are not movies.
Has-
Like I work in a lot of PhD.
All about
Yeah.
I haven't seen Porco. We got a music student in the second half. That's why
I just watched Anya for the first
I was
time.
actually curious.
Awesome. My new favorite thing is to just yell. Damn! I don't like him, but cracks me
I had
up.
wanted to actually get into this today, but I was in a meeting, so too. That one I was doing.
He is getting started. Be fake.
It's weird.
Oh yeah.
Like, it really blew your mind.
I'll fire my thing.
Yeah. Great call.
Something like that. If I was tech savvy, those things, I would be.
Really, you?
Because I would have saying something. I mean, it would be even more. Yeah, we'd be doing it.
I love the Japanese part. I love the Japanese.
Just
Follow him around. There's so much anime that is based around like aviation, flight, and stuff like that. I watched one the other day called The Sky Crawlers. It's good. It's kind of set in the near future where basically they have
Yeah, I kind of like giving her the eyes and like
scripted air battles or like
She's harmless.
it's odd, and but the thing is, all the pilots are like teenagers.
Is it good?
It's a lot into like sending them to war, and basically turning them into cannon fodder for like purposes that are purpose or stuff like that. So
Is it? They're scripted. Is it like Civil War kind of scripted, or is it like it's the powers that be?
Basically,
having a lot of people kill?
yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Sounds good.
That's pretty cool.
All right.
Oh, the last one. Okay.
I gotta go to
Let me
class.
introduce you to Carl. Hey, Carl, this is our last presenter.
You're awesome. Yeah, I gotta go to class.
Have a good one.
See you later. Hope your wife gets tired.
All right, gotta do it. We're all good right here. I'm gonna go to the restroom real quick.
Okay.
This is Chairman. She will be your next or so. She'll be clapping you like 5 minutes, 3 minutes. I will say it like we do. All right, up next we have Amber Alston.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? Good. My name is Amber Olson. I do go by AD, so that's my preferred name. But hey, either one works, right? So today we are getting into my very own research about incorporating a womanist horror into African American literature. So the title of my presentation today is "You're Practically One of Us: Incorporating a Womanist Horror Framework in African American Literature." So obviously I'll follow as proceeded. So I'm giving a literature review and an introduction to that, telling you how I conducted this overall study, giving you my findings, and quickly going over the implications and limitations. So let's get into setting the scene. I want us to walk with me here pretty quickly. I want us to journey to the last movie you watched, or even the last season finale of a show that you watched. Think about who won, or who ended up getting the victory at the end of it all. And then also to think about who lost. And then lastly, think about how you felt if the story didn't necessarily fit your narrative expectations. So when we watch and we critique media, a lot of times we often have that, oh man, that movie didn't necessarily end up the way that I wanted it to end up. But when it comes to Black representation in films, 9 times out of 10, it's always like that for Black women, and just Black America in general. So when we think about Black representation in the media, we often get into just critical discourse about victory, essential fighting justice and things of that nature. But one thing that doesn't necessarily get talked about are the caveats of the Black community that necessarily don't celebrate victory as much, right? In fact, we conceal, hide, and things of that nature. Analyzing the film The Strays, a couple of things to essentially give credit to. This film is a horror film, runs about for about an hour and 30 minutes. It was released a couple of years ago, February 22nd. It's streamed about 56 million views on the day. And overall, the film's significance actually takes place in the UK. However, it does have transnational implications to Black Americans here in the United States. So let's go ahead and get into where I'm coming into. So I'm a womanist scholar. What that means is I essentially look into the individuality of Black women in their lives in the daily space. This kind of takes a deeper approach to Black feminist studies, where we look at how Black women are critiquing policy, organizations, procedure, and things that aren't necessarily, don't quite get at the daily lived experiences of Black women. So things like microaggressions, for instance. However, with this women's horror framework, I call on women's scholars, and I also call on Black feminist horror scholars that essentially unpack a different dimension to Black studies overall. So when we get into the meshing of these two things together, I incorporate a womanist horror framework. It sounds pretty scary, but lean in, don't log off. So when we talk about womenist horror, we are essentially talking about the ways in which Black women are juxtaposing the daily lived experiences. So essentially, are we okay with concealing our Blackness? Are we okay with essentially suppressing those things for social status and higher levels of power? This comes with 4 tenets, right? So self-love is absent here. Please do not necessarily think that self-hate, it takes the place of that self-love absence. But what happens here is that there is a masking happening. There is a suppression happening in order to essentially get by and essentially appease rightness and right discourses. We go back to Toni Morrison's Beloved from the 80s, right, when we talk about remembering. So it's this ongoing, consistent cycle that essentially happens, and it causes the Black woman or Black main character anguish. The other 2 I'll blend here for time's sake, right, where we get into the acceptance of the close proximity to whiteness. So essentially taking microaggressions, taking racism and sexism, and being okay with that. Now, of course, in regular discourse, 9 times out of 10, we're going to get called out for that. But last but not least, what makes this horror is that there's a public exorcising or demonstration of fears that essentially correlates to the individual experience of the Black female character within stories, and then also too that it transcends into what we have to cope with this Black woman about the caveats of the Black female discourse that aren't necessarily talked about. Here's how I conducted the study. So I essentially watched this movie 3 times. The movie was about 90 minutes long, so it consisted of about 100 or 300 minutes of data exposure and collection. I did a thematic analysis, so essentially what that means is I'm going back based on my framework and then creating themes from that, and then of course from that I essentially pick out different instances and code those appropriately. I did an initial data collection, so I went back for the first time in the movie and was okay, I'm just going to watch this like a regular person. The second time I essentially did free coding, so I picked out quotes from that movie. The last time I actually did that coding, essentially categorize those instances throughout the movie. Here's what I found. There's 2 sides of this, but lean in. So we have how Black identity is challenged, right? So essentially what I'm getting at here is how the suppression of Blackness is present and how there's that overall absence of self-love from the perspective of the Black main character. So here we are escaping parenthood. The main character, Neve, in the story essentially is a mother who has 2 sets of children. She has fully Black children. She also has biracial children within her second remarriage. But essentially she negates that by essentially dismissing conversations at the dinner table. What we see here is that we want more, right? So of course, due to slavery and disenfranchisement in the United States, and of course disenfranchisement and slavery of the United Kingdom, what we see here is that there's an ongoing and consistent level of poverty here. Secondly, there is this overall need for this we-you language. So essentially the Black woman in this case takes the perspective of the we because of the proximity of whiteness. And then there's a suppressing identity through cosmetics, right? Black women love to be natural. As you can see here, it took about 30 seconds to get this microphone on because I love my natural hair. I'm not gonna hide that, right? But I have a head full of hair. But essentially what happens here within the women's sport framework is we wear wigs, right? We suppress that identity as a means of survival because we don't want that blackness to expose itself. The second year, this is into memory, right? So going back to Toni Morrison's beloved framework, we see that there is a repeated series of events that are causing a Black woman anguish. What we have here is the rememory through nightmares and dreams and the compromising of the kitchen, the rhetorical kitchen, which I'll get into later. And of course, last but not least, we have rememory through horrific playtime. So blackness here takes the perspective of horror because, again, it's this we-you dichotomy that's happening here. So what happens is Dion and Carl, who are the 3 Black children in the story, what happens is they haunt and they taunt and they tease me and essentially get her to come to terms with how she abandoned them as little children. She essentially said that she's going off to a hairdresser but never came back. It emulates similar patterns and themes for a Black father as well. My last 2 findings here, whiteness is reinforced. And so what happens here is that there is a violation of whiteness, white womanhood, and respectability for erasure. So essentially here we accept piousness, respectability politics. So it's things like hosting, having coffee, conversations, lunch, paying for things are essential events that happen throughout this movie. Neve essentially hosts a gala, which at the peak of the movie, it gets rated by Carl and Dion, her fully biologically Black children. We also have control, ownership, and oversight. So Neve's role within the movie is that she is essentially an overseer for a Montessori school or private school, right? So we even get instances of privatization of the education system and who can and cannot be accepted into those spaces. We also have the angel of the house philosophy, folks. So essentially what that looks like is the angel of the house cooks, cleans, caters to her husband and her children, and essentially pivots to just being in the back in the world here. And last but not least, there is an exorcism of community fears, but also individual fears. At the end of the movie, Neve has to essentially come to terms with how she abandoned her children. And spoiler alert, at the end of it, she abandons both sets of kids. So essentially here we have this blackest qualifier motif because her husband essentially calls out, oh, but you didn't love your Black children, and essentially that calls into criticisms there. The last thing that I want to talk about is kitchen as place, folks. So in rhetorical criticism, we often talk about how Black women are transforming their kitchen spaces. But what happens here within the women's core framework is that the kitchen is compromised. We often don't necessarily critique who we're letting in and outside of our kitchens. Kitchens during the enslavement period here in America essentially forced Black women to do both cooking, cleaning, and nursing, while systems of whiteness were essentially able to pass with white women and white womanhood. Last but not least, there is a feeling of coping with the situation, coping with abandonment, rather than actually working to heal those things. So what are the implications and limitations of my research, folks? Well, it's quite simple. Us as Black women and just in general, right, we need to make sure that we are giving empowerment to the spaces that we hold. Doesn't matter if you're Black, white, Asian, Latino, so on and so forth, but we need to make sure that we actually critique the spaces that we're essentially inhabiting. Next but not least, we want to make sure that there's critical engagement with Black horror, right? Because these get at specific instances within the Black community that are not necessarily talked about or is broadcasted as much within the Black community. Now, of course, obviously, social justice, empowerment, and critical engaging with the policies and systems that keep us bound, not just as Black people, but as women, as international folks and things of that nature, are something that we need to critique. Last but not least, I want to talk about the limitations, right? When it comes to womanist horror, it can get conflated with self-hate. However, Blackness is often addressed within the movie, so it's not necessarily something that is dismissed completely, but it is hidden for a certain experience, so in order to protect ourselves. And last but not least, the methodological freedom within this study is something to essentially question, simply because it could lead to missing pieces that I may or may not have collected throughout my 3 times of watching this movie. Now, I want to leave us with this, folks. Neve, and I did some research on this, but Neve actually is Latin for Nava. Nava is essentially this partial remelting and this partial refreezing of Blackness within the movie. Throughout this, right, what we see is this granular snow happening within Neve's character, as she essentially sometimes melts for the purposes of self-care and love of her children, but also to that whiteness is frozen. So I want us to think about the ways in which we are partially refreezing and essentially molding to fit the status quo rather than just being our actual self. Thank you.
James Marsden.
Next, please welcome Terry Mann.
Alan Cumming. So I guess they're still announcing, but Jesus, is there going to be time for a story? Yeah, that's long here. Everyone's saying, like, why did y'all announce the Thunderbolts? Does that mean they all survived the Thunderbolts movie we haven't seen?
Well, I guess I'm documenting now because I have successfully defended my dissertation. And so over the past 3 years, I have conducted research on child mental health outcomes and youth violence. And so specifically for this presentation, I wanted to highlight a household structure that we don't focus on much in social behavior sciences research, and that's grandparent-headed households. So historically, these households have stepped up and grandparent caregivers have been able to bridge a gap when something goes wrong and when parents are not able to be present for their child. So why grandparent-headed households? So in 2022, it's estimated that around 2.7 million children live in grandparent-headed households. And so I was fascinated by that. And so also with my personal experience living in a two family household, single parent household in one, and then going over to a 2-parent married household. So I was fascinated on this particular number of children, and so also learning that grandparents are older, they're on fixed income, and they also have their own range of adversities. So imagine a retired grandmother on fixed income getting custody of her 12-year-old or even an infant. They have historically been at a disadvantage, and then adding in something else also exacerbates the problem. And so for my dissertation, I wanted to see how household composition did influence child mental health outcomes and also youth violence outcomes. And so for my dissertation, I elected to work on 3 different papers. And so for this presentation, I am specifically only focusing on grandparent-headed households. And so paper 1 was a systematic review, and it contained 21 articles, and those articles range from qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method articles, and also they began from 2001 to 2023. So the reason why I selected 2021 is that is the year that the Surgeon General designated youth violence as a public health issue. And so moving into paper 2, I conducted a comparative analysis pre and post pandemic, and I did use data from the National Survey of Children's Health. And to represent the pre-pandemic period, I analyzed the 2018-19 year and then 2021-22 for the post-pandemic. And I did focus on children 3 to 17. And specifically for child mental health outcomes, I focused on anxiety, depression, and behavior problems. And so paper 3 is an analysis that compares household composition and bullying. And specifically, bullying was my violence indicator. And so I did utilize the National Survey of Children's Health data for this paper as well, but I focused on 2021 to 22 because that was the latest data set available. And so going into the key findings for paper 1, so with my systematic review, so what I found is that the articles displayed that children had higher rates of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and also that they came to the households with complex traumas. and they experience different things such as parental death, substance misuse, exposure to violence. And so they were coming into these households with the grandparents. And then also the articles showed that grandparents are protective when compared to children that live in single parent households or children that live in foster homes. Children with grandparents had better odds of, well, decreased odds of exhibiting violence and aggression. And so also one thing to highlight, so my background is in CPS, and so I have done a lot of placing children with relatives. And so a lot of times you will come across families that the grandparent has had this child for 10 years, but they don't have formal custody of this child. So that, my personal experience was reaffirmed by the systematic review where most of these articles indicated that they face challenges with getting services for these children and also continuing services if the child is already in services. And also one study in particular, it's my favorite one, so whenever somebody asks me about my systematic review, I always mention this article. It came from the perspectives of faculty, teachers and administrators, and how they have observed the difference in behaviors for children living in the grandparent households. And so moving into paper 2, so paper 2 was my big, huge, it was great. And so the 2018-2019 analysis showed that grandparent households, they fared worse when compared to single parent, 2-parent non-married, and compared to the 2-parent married households. So that's specifically why I do want to highlight grandparent households. And also, I'm only showing you here the adjusted odds ratios for the post-pandemic because these were the highest. So I did see the rates of anxiety, depression, and behavior problems increase and be exacerbated by the pandemic for children in grandparent-headed households when compared to 2-parent households. And so for paper 3, so what I did find is that children living in non-traditional households in general had increased involvement in bullying. And so specifically for children in grandparent households, what I did for the bullying variables, I assessed the child being bullied and being and bullying others. But also I do want to point out that with the National Survey of Children's Health Data, it's based off of parent perceptions, and so that's a huge disclaimer with especially paper 3 when you're talking about bullying, because I'm pretty sure children are not going to disclose that I've been bullying someone at school. So that being said, I also looked at demographic factors and I included those in the model, and I found that there were race and gender differences for children living in grandparent households and being involved in bullying. And so just putting all of that into a real world narrative and just something for you to think about. So with the systematic review, what it affirmed was that some caregivers not only were struggling with children exhibiting these behaviors in public or in school settings or committing crimes, but there was just a range of different definitions of violence. And so I think that it's important for us to understand when we're looking at the context of my research, violence is very broad. And so I hope that with all this work, I can broaden the definition specifically for grandparents and how it relates to them and just interacting with their children and also the public, teachers, law enforcement, and all of those things. But then also, I I mentioned earlier grandparents being older. In the qualitative articles in my systematic review, they mentioned personal experiences of grandparents stating that they had issues paying for things and had issues accessing certain technology. They just didn't have it. And so that was reaffirmed by my analysis of paper 2 and paper 3 and how those disparities are translated into everyday, my everyday work as a CPS understanding. And then also I think to some of the reason why I focused on bullying and violence in the third paper, one study found that children in grandparent households were 28% more likely to reoffend, and that's them already being involved in the justice system. And so it doesn't offer context outside of it and what led up to it. So that's why I'm particularly interested in grandparent households. And so, just a conclusion. So what can I share with you and what can be done with this research? And so I feel that it's important to note that grandparents do feel crucial gaps and they should be studied more. And then also understanding that not only are the children affected, the grandparents are affected as well. They need services as well. And so practical interventions need to be implemented to address these concerns. And then my slide is kind of this quote I wanted to leave you with. So I'm going to go to the next slide and then leave you with the quote. So what all of this means, so as far as policy change, we can do more to implement programs that are focused specifically on grandparent caregivers. And then also helping grandparent or non-traditional caregivers retain physical and legal custody of children so they can access mental health needs or any other services that they might need. And then also for community programs, just maybe mentorship programs between grandparents. I know personally in my life, my grandmother has a lot of friends who they're all grandparent caregivers. So just mentoring and sharing resources, and then maybe more intervention in the school. I think that Arthur that I always bring up is a perfect, it's perfect to highlight how school can be important and they can be an asset to these families. And then also just number one, recognizing that grandparent households is a vital prevention strategy for youth violence prevention. And so I quoted this is my quote. No child should struggle alone, no grandparent should raise a child without support. So that's what I want you to take.
Now we have Hannah Joy Sims.
You're such a nerd. You have a book tattooed on your arm.
A little bit about student study habits and particularly flashcards and how we're using them or not using them. So my talk is about, are you studying correctly? How students use and misuse flashcards. So since the dawn of time, there has been one invention that has been made a concept. So from the bicycle to the chariot to hoverboard, one invention has been made unchanged. And that is zero. Why?
studies that we both seen a similar test. Rather than basic memory, trying to remember huge amounts of information, whether that's SAT vocabulary or French vocabulary or just cramming for a test, students often turn to one tool, and that is the flashcard. So flashcards are an extremely popular study tool among students, specifically around university, and studies have cited that, especially analysis of study techniques, that over 50% of college students use flashcards as a regular study strategy. And because by looking at UCLA graduates, undergraduates also reported that almost 78% of undergraduates report using flashcards as a study tool. I'm sure that everyone here has a Quizlet deck left in dust somewhere from some class they had to take. So like the wheel, flashcards have been around a lot longer than you think. When faced when trying to remember a lot of information then medieval and ancient times, humans have tried to use memory techniques to try to remember information. So you can see this as look at the method of loci, memory palace, and actually flashcards didn't really begin with the computer. So if you look at the 1800s, we had reading cards, which they were termed, and then going to the 1900s, we turned flashcard entered off the dictionary, and then we have the math stuff in the flashcard after World War II. And then to the 2010s, you can see these big flashcard systems being passed to something like Quizlet or Anki or Memorize, and this kind of shows that flashcards have stood the test of time, and that we've always, as we're trying to learn and remember things, look for ways to try to remember information. And flashcards, albeit simple, have always been the tool that we've drawn for. So why do flashcards work? So as a psychology student, we were going back to the 1800s, looking at Urban and Ebbinghaus. So he discovered that when reviewing information, if that information is not reinforced, we forget it in days. If you're not, there's actually a way to slow down forgetting. And that's what he terms the spacing effect. So I think he discovered something called the forgetting curve, and that kind of shows you how when you space out information over time, you actually remember it better. So for example, instead of studying for 5 hours the night before the test, if you actually study 1 hour 5 days before the test, you remember it better. Which in psychology we say space practice is better than math practice. So in layman terms, okay. So education researchers and education technology research have used the spacing effect as the foundation for what we know as space repetition systems. So in layman terms, we say, well, flashcard system, then we call it psychology and education, and education here we know as space repetition systems. So these are algorithms that apply the spacing effect are scheduled to at optimal intervals to ensure that we use information just before we get it. So they have very humble beginnings with the lecture system. So we just had flashcards and you put them in a box, and if you remember them, it goes to the next box, and if you don't remember them, it goes back. So super basic algorithm, and it doesn't seem like an algorithm, but it actually is. And the spacing effect has led us to modern personalization algorithms like Quizlet or Anki, and now we see that we can have these AI adaptations as well. So now that we understand that flashcards have been around for ages and that they've stood the test of time, and that they're extremely popular study techniques, my main question in my research is, are students using these tools correctly? Just because a tool is effective does not guarantee its success. And so let's see what the research has to say about that. don't know what you're doing. Shocker. So, we've all been there, you know, you're studying, you have your cup of tea, you have your little Ambien music, you know, your Pomodoro effect, you have your 5 sort of highlighters, okay, in blue, you're going through your highlighter, blue on pink, blue on blue, and it turns out that these aren't as effective as you think. So research points to the fact that students rely on techniques that feel effective but aren't. So the analysis, he actually did a huge meta-analysis of different strategies, techniques, and super popular ones like reading or highlighting, summarizing, even though they feel super effective to us, they actually aren't. And in another study done by Cornell and York in 2008, they had 2 different groups of students and they had to remember different paintings. And a group of students who had to remember using space practice and math practice. And students actually remembered it better with math practice, but when asked to self-report which practice they thought was better, they reported math practice is better. So it goes to show that even though we have these effective strategies, students don't really know what their students don't know what they don't know, and they don't really know how to study what we think they do. And this is to 2 important principles in cognitive psychology, and one of them is called desirable difficulty. So this kind of touches on the fact that effective strategies initially feel hard for us initially, but in the long run they're better. So in terms of the study, even though space practice was better for the students, because cramming felt better, students relied on cramming. And it also ties to the second principle I want to talk about, which is judgment of learning. So these are how students decide what to study. And research shows that we're really bad at it. So students often rely on superficial cues when judging their learning, either overconfidence or as learning students, they often underestimate their performance and underconfidence. So there's no middle ground. Students are either, oh, I really know this, you get C, or they're more tentative and they don't really have a firm understanding with what they know and what they don't know. So this leads to 2 studies that I looked at involving real data from a flashcard system. So I know Quiz is like the super big one, but there's another system called Omni, which is your next move. So that's what that is. But I reached out to this developer and I'm like, I really want to use your data, so I really want to understand how students actually use the flashcard system. And so I did 2 different studies, and one was a clustering analysis, which just looks at grouping similar things, and the other one we looked at which different types of algorithms that students use in the flashcard systems, and they both point to the same thing. Students don't know how to use these systems effectively. So when looking at this over here, this cluster analysis over here, it kind of points to the groups leading towards very low recall, even though they reported that their confidence was super high. So it kind of leads us to a takeaway that and it ties into my thesis research into that effectiveness isn't just about the tool, it's about how we use it. So when we look at study strategies, it's not just about trying to find the best tool, like giving a power bill to a toddler. Just because it's a really effective tool doesn't mean you know how to use it. So I don't think we should kind of stop the advancement of these education technology tools, but more so focus towards how students study and giving them these interventions to study more effectively. So adaptive algorithms, which we do in my lab, kind of take the textual students in this study environment and they structure this practice for students based on their past recall, how well they know the item, and education technology is using it for this, which is super cool. But I do think there should still be some structured interventions in the classroom and outside the classroom to teach students how to study. And and Tim would be like, hey, here's 200 terms on the French Revolution, fun. And you should, I'm practicing with a student that you know how to study history.
And finally, to close us out, we have Nicole Rodriguez.
So, good afternoon, I'm Dr. Rodriguez, and today we're going to talk about the influence of Chinese government on Dominican classical music. With this research, I aim to demonstrate that there was a shift in Dominican classical music, specifically in composition, after Rafael's dictatorship. I'm going to do that by the analysis of two orchestral works of two of the main classical music composers of the Dominican Republic. But before getting there, here's some context. We gotta start from the beginning. The Dominican Republic proclaimed its independence from Haiti in 1844, different to many other Latin American countries which proclaimed their independence from a European colonial power. That translated into a really deep anti-Black and anti-Haitian root for the Dominican identity. That was later reinforced during Rafael Trujillo's dictatorship from 1930 to 1961. The picture I share here is a place people were required to have at their homes that goes. In this home, the leaders and national citizens. Right to serve, liberty, work, and equality, which are, by the way, his missions. 1955, year of the benefactor of the motherland. He had this clear mission of refining Dominican culture. He did that by giving a boost to fine arts, specifically music. With that, two main classical music institutions were created: the National Symphony Orchestra in 1941 and the National Conservatory of Music in 1942. Both of them from pre-existing institutions. In the case of the National Symphony Orchestra, from the Orchestra of Santo Domingo, and the National Conservatory of Music from the Musical Museum of Santo Domingo. And both of them also benefited from more conflicts in Europe. In the case of the National Symphony Orchestra, its first conductor was the Spanish conductor, Enrique Gazzarzapi, and from the National Conservatory of Music, its first director was the German conductor Edward Felder. In the case of Enrique Gazzarzapi, I need to talk a little more about him. Besides his work as the conductor of the National Symphony Orchestra, he also did a really important job as composition teacher and also gave musical appreciation courses to general audience. These two pictures I share here as our picture of him conducting the National Symphony Orchestra. And this is my favorite one, because you can see him here teaching at the National Conservatory of Music, and with a picture of Trujillo behind him. So, my before of this era is Juan Francisco Garcia. He was born in 1892 in Santiago de Caballeros. He had a teacher who taught him how to play the trumpet, but then he taught himself about harmony, composition, and music history. His work, Sinfonía Castellana, written in 1935, but premiered in 1941, is considered the first Dominican symphony. I have this picture of the first page of the score because it has a novel written by himself, which portrays the whole thing about this work. It goes, the theme developed in the three movements of the symphony are little disfigured transcriptions from the written form of Dominican folk chants. Garcia also did a really important job of transcribing the oral tradition of Dominican folk chants to written music, that way preserving them. His works in Sinfonía Castellana is divided in three movements. There are three big chunks of music and separated. The first movement, Adagio and Tempo di Merengue, It has a really slow introduction that means imagine, and a second part, Tempo de Merengue, which portrays merengue, which is our national folk dance. Its main characteristic is that it's lively, it's energetic, people dance it really fast, and the instruments they use for it, which is a two-faced steel drum called lambola and a metal scraper called bulla, which is similar to the Cuban wheel. Like I described here because we can see the layout of the orchestra, and it's interesting to me how he did not add those instruments I just mentioned. Instead, in the main theme of this movement, he added percussion patterns in the strings. I hope you can hear it. Okay, we can Then we have the second movement, andante a la media tuna, which it means it's going to be slow, not as slow as the viaggio, the first movement. It's going to be a slow-paced movement, and it includes media tuna, which is a 10 poem battle in which there's not really a winner. So we can hear that in the media tuna movement, we can hear the people reciting poems back and forth, and he portrays that in this movement with themes that go back and forth with the different sections of the orchestra. It also portrays an ABA form. And if you're not familiar with it, you can just imagine an Oreo, and it's basically the same with music. So, what I show here is just a beautiful section with a flute solo that portrays what I just mentioned. It also portrays chants from the countryside of the Dominican Republic, so that's what we hear. The third movement is avant-garde, which means he's going to present three themes, and they're going to be repeated throughout the whole movement. The most famous one, for Alma de Serán, it was interesting to me that he added the lyrics to the score, no, a note for the person that's conducting the piece. And we can hear it. Now, my actor, this period, is Manuel Simon. He was born in San Francisco de Macorís in 1916. He was a student of Maestro Pesar Chapi, and when Maestro Pesar Chapi left the country in 1945, he went with him to Uruguay, and he studied in the conservatory at the moment. He later became the first Dominican person with a degree in composition. Then later, he came back to the Dominican Republic, and he became the conductor of the Symphony Orchestra and the director of the National Conservatory of Music. He also taught composition for the first time in the conservatory, and from him we have the first generation of composers in the Dominican Republic. His work, Suite Pastoral, written in 1959, is part of what the critique considers as his second period of composing, which portrays the use of Dominican folk chants mixed with 20th century composition techniques. This work is divided into three parts, not as big as the work I just talked about earlier. And the three parts portray different sceneries of the Dominican landscape. The first part, introduction and dance, this little part I added here, you can hear how the orchestra, how there's like a contrast between the orchestra and this solo can be added. And that goes back and forth with this first part. We can hear also how the other instruments respond to that flute solo. In the second part of the clavicula, I think that's the part when we can also like see that landscape like you mentioned. And he also goes back to those fountains from the compass that is doing my clavic. This part is gonna sound a little different from the one we just heard. Then we have the third part, which is the finale. And the chunk I added here, we can hear like the climax of the whole piece, and we can hear how the different pieces of the orchestra arrive to that climax in different ways. We can hear how the higher pitches of the orchestra arrive to the climax in a little faster way than the lower pitches. So in conclusion, yes, there was a shift in the American classical music, specifically in composition, after the five pitches regime. And the two institutions I just mentioned, the National Conservatory of Music, that's how it is today, and the National Symphony Orchestra, they fostered that shift. But they haven't evolved much ever since. The National Conservatory of Music, for example, is not able to provide higher education degrees in any branch. And that made me think, so was all of this like a whim of a like dictator that resulted into unsustainable institutions? But then I thought it at least gave the opportunity to people like me to have a formal education in music. So that's thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for all of our presenters. Thank you all so much for coming out, and we hope to see you same place, same time tomorrow for our undergraduate students.
I gotta let this keep going because the live stream is like a minute or two behind. Yeah, have a good night.
So basically, this headset is not culturally appropriate.
That's a new thing.
It's not culturally appropriate for our kids.
Gosh. And I mean, we've got the lapel one, but that's the one that unless you're talking directly
Right into it, yeah.
like, it's almost like you got to put it in your cheek.
No. Let's see.
And we did that, last time, so maybe it just.
Let me see how well this works.
I think you just cut it off.
Okay.
I mean, if that helps with some of them.
Now we can see if maybe around the neck might work better for some people.
Ran out of juice.
Okay, so I'll have to take that off the charts.
Pick it up at the end.
But yeah, that we can't have it pulling people's hair out.
No, not good. Not good.
No. Okay.
Question. Do you have a SIM card reader? Did you know
Like a.
for the camera so I can get them all?
Like an adapter?
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like I should have an extra one, but I don't think Is it a mini or a full size?
Either.
Okay. Yeah.
I know. It's just like, the weird thing is,